Hi everyone, it's Matt Collins here from Platypus Digital. Hope you're well and welcome to our webinar on digital transformation. And the big question is, what does it even mean? It's the hot phrase on everyone's lips. It's everywhere in the charity sector at the moment. Big organizations, small organizations, and everything in between are recruiting digital transformation managers and directors. They're bringing digital into the senior management team in a way that hasn't happened before. Digital transformation really is at the top of everyone's agendas at the moment, but it's a little bit of a kind of vague concept. It's a vague idea, and sometimes it gets a bit lost as to what it actually means. So today we're going to have a look at that very question. We're going to posit a few theories, and we're going to talk to someone in this webinar who really knows what digital transformation means in the charity context. So without further ado, let's dive right in. So this kind of initially came about a few months ago when I posed a question on Twitter, simply digital transformation, what does it even mean? Reply and tell me your answer. I have my own ideas about what digital transformation is all about. Other people have their ideas, but I was really interested just to get an idea of what people's initial answer to this question actually was. It's always good to talk about what the meaning of terms actually is before we start embarking on huge projects with huge budgets to go along with them. And so that's what we did. So the first answer that came through was simply going paperless at work. In unrelated news, I'm adding digital transformation to buzzword bingo cards. So two interesting things for me there. Obviously, there's the humorous throwaway statement of digital transformation getting added to buzzword bingo cards. It is a little bit of a buzzword, I think. I think organizations can talk about it without really having an understanding of what basic digital marketing or digital infrastructure means for their organization. A lot of it can simply mean we're going to do away with all the paper files that we've got. We're going to move everything to online systems. Everything's going to be based on Dropbox or Google Drive. We're going to start communicating using Slack at work, and everyone's going to just dive into this and get into it without any kind of encouragement at all. That's obviously a bit of an oversimplification. That kind of infrastructure is one of those things that people start to think about when they consider terms like digital transformation. Before I go any further, I should say that if you have any questions at any point in this webinar, then please do tweet them either at us, which is at Platypus Digi, using the hashtag DT even mean, as in what does digital transformation even mean, and we will start answering those questions towards the end. So the next answer I got was looking at how you provide a service from square one with the new assumption that digital tools are available and indeed integral. Now that's an interesting point of view, because if you were starting your organization tomorrow and the only tools that you had available to you were a laptop and a mobile phone, what would you do? So how would you build your service from the ground up if all you had was the laptop, maybe that you're listening to this webinar on, and a mobile phone? No doubt the approaches that you would take would be very different to the approaches that you use now. You know, your organization may have been around for decades or even longer. That brings its own historical way of doing things, its own best practices or not so best practices that become really ingrained over time, and that becomes very difficult to change. What if you're starting over and you know that digital tools are absolutely everywhere in 2016? They're integral to reaching people at any kind of scale. So how do you provide a service from square one, knowing that all those digital tools are available? Quite simply then, the answer to digital transformation, what does it even mean? It means don't be Blockbuster. Now I'm going to emphasize that with a special red line here because I think it's a really important point. If you don't know, Blockbuster is one of a few organizations. It's very high profile. You probably remember renting videos and DVDs many years ago on a Friday night, returning them on a Saturday through the special post box, getting fined for late returns. And that was how you watched kind of videos, films, latest releases and TV box sets. That's not how we view things in 2016. People have Netflix accounts, Now TV, iPlayer, on-demand services are absolutely everywhere, and they're the main way that we catch up with things like that. Blockbuster was too slow to adapt to that changing market. It didn't embark on a digital transformation program, and eventually it went bankrupt. Now, it may be too extreme an idea to suggest that the next charity blockbuster is only around the corner, because most charities are not so reliant on the income that comes from customers, if you like, as a lot of organizations that are B2C, like Blockbuster was, might be. But nevertheless, don't be Blockbuster is a pretty important piece of advice. So let's just look at a couple of things that the digital transformation might be. Now, is it digital service delivery? Macmillan Cancer Support are one organisation that did digital transformation in a really big way. Their former head of digital, Amanda Nailon, she actually transformed herself out of a job, you might say. Digital became more embedded throughout the organisation. There were more departmental digital leads, and so there was less need for a central digital team or a central head of digital to support all of that. So obviously that's a pretty big move. And around 50% of their services, that's services to the beneficiary, the reason that charities exist, if you like, they're actually provided online. It's the first place that a lot of people turn, whether it's getting support for cancer or looking for advice on other health issues, or seeking counselling support. And Macmillan do that in a really big way. So digital transformation is often seen as, chucking out your old service delivery method as a charity and moving it all online. If you do face-to-face counselling sessions, you're moving online to chat. If you do face-to-face health drop-ins, then you change that to forums. I don't think that's necessarily the whole story, but that kind of service delivery element is obviously really important when it comes to digital transformation. Now, gov.uk are obviously huge on this sort of area, and I think this kind of funnel, if you like, is a really important one when you're thinking about how you actually change your service to become more digital by default. First stage is simply discovery, finding out what your users need. That could be the people who use your counselling service or whatever service you provide, what to measure and what the constraints are. So that's actually finding out what do your users need. Is this something that they actually would benefit from, or is it simply something that you're doing to digitize your service for the sake of it, if you like? Then it's about building a prototype, testing it with users and learning from it. Now, if you've ever gone through a model home, you'll have walked through a kitchen, and the kitchen looks and feels very much like the kitchen in the real home is going to look like, but nothing's plumbed in, like nothing actually works. There's no actual electricity. It's not sort of functioning kitchen. Can you build that kind of model home kitchen for the type of digital service that you might provide? Could it be simply a very basic interface that you could show to your users to see if it's something that they would actually use? Is it something they would actually react to well? It doesn't have to be all singing, all dancing in order to go public with it. It just needs to work just well enough to start getting those initial reactions and building more gradually from there. Then it's about scaling up and going public, so getting into a more kind of public-facing version, getting something that's not just for your current users but for everybody to use. And then it's about going live and learning how to continuously improve the live service. Thinking that your go live date is not your kind of final date; it's just the beginning of your testing. So that's a bit about service delivery. Now, is it just good digital marketing? Let's say you're an organization whose digital outputs are just not good at all, really, and you need to start using things like email marketing better, SEO, paid search. This particular table is how companies overall rate the following channels in terms of return on investment. If you were to start basing your digital marketing outputs on a table like this, and you started smashing every area from email to content marketing and mobile marketing, would that be transformation enough? Now, arguably, it absolutely would. If you weren't doing digital marketing at all well, and overnight you suddenly transformed that and started doing it really well, I would say that's pretty transformative change. Nevertheless, a lot of people would see it a bit more as kind of service delivery, and sometimes they might resist that change, whereas they might be more pro this change because it's a bit more exciting and interesting. And finally, is it just a strong digital culture? And if you recognize this guy from the excellent movie Office Space, then, and maybe if you even work with someone like this, then it might be a sadly familiar sight. A colleague saying, if you could just double my organic traffic, then that would be great. Now, nothing is really going to change in your organization unless it has the culture to support it. You won't get people behind digital marketing being transformed overnight or changing your service to be much more of an online one unless the culture for change exists in the first place. Now, when we talk about transformation, it tends to suggest a really fast pace of change. That's not something that you're sort of iterating, gradually and bit by bit over a period of months or even years. This is something that we're looking at as a faster paced thing, or it certainly suggests having a faster pace. Now, if you have a very change resistant organization that doesn't like to experiment with new tactics or new projects, then you're going to find that digital transformation project much more difficult to actually implement. So there's a kind of cultural element there whereby you need to get people behind the idea of change in the first place, get them behind the idea that digital has already changed the cause that they're working for, something that your competitors are doing really well. It's something that's transformed film, transformed music, and charities are not going to be far behind. And it's about kind of inspiring people with those case studies and making them see that change is not only possible, but it's actually imperative. And only when you do that kind of foundation piece, only then can you actually do something transformative for your service users as well. So enough about me. I'd like to introduce our special guest, Sarah Jordan, who is the digital consultant at the MS, digital transformation consultant at the MS Society. Hello, Sarah.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good. So I'm going to stop talking for just a little bit, and I thought it'd be great to draw on your expertise and your experience in delivering transformation for a household name, a big charity, to see what it's actually like. So do you want to just tell us a bit about who you are and what you do at MS Society?
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, Matt. So yeah, as Matt said, I am digital transformation lead for the MS Society. I've been there for the last, coming up for 2 years actually, leading their sort of transformation program, originally heading up the digital team and then moving specifically to look at the broader opportunities of digital, a transformation program, a new site development and that sort of thing, following on from having had a similar role as Oxfam's head of digital for the last 5 years. So pure background in digital for over 20 years, which is starting to show my age, across kind of commercial education and most recently charities and startups. And that's been interesting in the kind of digital transformation journey because those two are completely opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of capability and speed. And it's been really interesting to work across both. So there's a lot of learnings, I think, that can be shared from those.
Okay, so at the MS Society in particular then, can you give us an idea of what digital transformation has meant in that role and for that organisation? I've talked about various definitions that you could apply and are to some extent equally valid, but what's it actually meant for MS Society and your role?
Yeah, I mean, I think as you saw in all those responses in the tweets, it's kind of all of those things. And none of them in some way. It's kind of holistically looking across the organisation and trying to respond to the opportunities of digital, I think. So certainly for charities, I think a lot of digital transformation programs tend to be kicked off by a website redevelopment. The need to kind of catch up. For MS, that was definitely the case. Our site isn't responsive and things like that. And it's just how do you respond and kind of reflect the external environment that you're operating in? Because as you said, users, our audiences, and just people in the outside world have changed. And something, internally within a business, then we haven't necessarily caught up and kept on a level with that. So there's a lot of tech-driven sort of response in the first instance, and how to improve just how we're engaging with people. But for me, it's definitely much bigger than that in terms of the mindsets, the culture, the ways of working that you need to actually support it. Because there's a famous quote from somebody saying organisations don't change, people do. I'm thinking about that. But it's really, really true. So whether it's as a response to digital or anything else, it's very much the people inside that organisation that are going to make it work. Or not. And we had, as I was saying, we had 4 strands to the transformation programme there, which was looking at strategy, people, processes, and technology, and kind of almost trying to do it in that order as well. So where do we want to go? And then what are the skills, capabilities, ways of working, tools, and everything to support that? Last of all being our website.
That's interesting what you're saying about the strategy, people, processes, and technology, and kind of sort of working backwards, if you like. So when you're thinking about what you want to achieve as an organization, ultimately, I guess that's providing support for anyone who has MS. Is it as broad as that, or is it a bit more?
Yeah, very much. So it is at one level service delivery, definitely. So how can technology improve what we do to support and improve the lives of people with MS and affected by MS? So we were looking at things like apps for tracking symptoms and stuff like that, where you could really make a difference on a day-to-day basis, because people often keep paper diaries of how they feel day to day. And also your mobile phone is kind of attached to you. How can you use that technology to improve that process, speed it up, and just make it easier for people? And that was the same sort of internally in the way that we work as well. So again, how can we be more efficient in delivering the services? How can we reach more people? How can we do that more cost effectively? And just looking, for me, it's really holistic across all areas of the business, and kind of saying, how do we work better? We set in our transformation, we had a load of, as you do in charities, kind of documents detailing this, and internal comms and all sorts of stuff around it. And we had a question which basically said, if the MS Society was formed today, what would it look like? Which is kind of what you asked at the start. It's really thinking about that. So charities are very siloed. We tend to have kind of legacy systems and historic underinvestment in the technology and kind of the tools we need. But forgetting that, if we were to create this organisation today, what would we look like? And it would be really, really different. So how do you kind of fundamentally look at that across all areas that you work? Service delivery is really important, but so is finance, so is operations, so is HR, and they're often the bits that see themselves less connected to this, and it's less relevant for them, and then harder to sort of bring on board. But it really does need to be very much across all areas of the way the organisation works, I think.
And you make an interesting point about the finance and HR functions. You know, the digital is kind of sat within marketing, I think, historically speaking, or communications, and it's seen therefore as a marketing tool rather than a service delivery tool, or even a kind of back office infrastructure tool. How have you gone about getting those sorts of, for want of a better term, back office functions like finance and HR bought into that vision?
I think it's very, I mean, for me, it's definitely one of the biggest challenges, because as you say, kind of digital comms teams, marketing teams, fundraising teams are getting it increasingly and sort of doing that and embedding digital, and it is those back office functions that see themselves less in that sense. It's very much demonstrating, I think, for anybody, the kind of, at one level, the burning platform, the need to do it, the cost saving efficiencies or whatever it is, but also the opportunities and how it's going to make their lives easier. Because at a really basic level, people don't really care whether you're building a new website or doing a transformation program, and that's your problem. But they do care about their day-to-day role, their objectives, the challenges that they face in kind of operating and doing their job day to day. So if you can show that you're going to make some of that easier for them, then it sounds a bit sort of manipulative in some way, but it's not. It's very much about sort of selling that opportunity and helping people to see where it's going to make a difference to their lives and their jobs at work, and how you can get people on board, because I think you really need kind of champions in those different teams, and appeal to what drives them and what their objectives are. And if it's finance, then it's basically the bottom line and saving money and bringing in increased income, and that obviously works for fundraising as well. It's like, how can you demonstrate this in a way that's going to appeal to your fundraising director or your finance director or HR. And there's a lot of reports and stuff out there from other organisations outside of the sector that are kind of showing the impact of doing this, and how much potential saving you're going to make, and how much more efficiency and staff retention and attraction, and things about sort of recruiting millennials and all sorts of this data that's really important to kind of show to the board and your trustees and everybody that this really is critical for the organisation to survive. I mean, as we sort of say flippantly, the next blockbuster, but actually it is, people are going out of business if they're not responding, and it's just maintaining relevance for the future. So it's very much about kind of appealing to their individual interests, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And it's probably something that most people don't really think about too much when they're planning digital transformation programs or trying to deliver them. What other things do you think people might not necessarily think about when doing digital transformation, but are still super important?
I mean, we've done some interesting work internally to look at this, because we faced a number of challenges in doing it at the MS Society and in previous roles, and even down to the basic naming of it, I think is really important. So, you know, we sort of say, should it be called digital at all? Should it be transformation? What is it? And that's at one level just semantics, and kind of shouldn't be a problem, and does drive me a little bit nuts that we focus on it so much. But actually, it is a big issue for people. And digital very much means a team. Digital transformation means a website often, and if people see it as broader organizational change, then it's like, well, why are you leading it? So there's a real, for me, kind of clarity that's needed at the start to set the scope, set the scale of this, and even down to the naming, how big it is, how fundamentally important it is, and making it work in the organization that you're in. So I've done it previously where we haven't called it digital transformation, we haven't called it anything. And it's kind of getting it in under the radar and by stealth, which sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. Sometimes you do need to name it and really put it out there, because people, you know, that buzzword bingo, it's something that everybody's aware of at the moment. And for me, it's really kind of adapting to your organization and making sure that how you define it and kick it off is really going to be important to your success. And going back to appealing to people's individual objectives and stuff, making it everybody else's as well, because it's not just your project, it's not just your program of work, it's actually the whole organization that needs to buy into this, own it, and getting sort of CEO and senior leadership buy-in is really, really important, and embedding that kind of across the organization so everybody really sees why they're doing it and kind of walks the walk as well. So not just talking it, but talking about it, but using the tools that you're, you know, trying to instill, and being on Trello or Slack or whatever it is. Again, some of it's a little bit sort of short term, but it's like actually you do need to kind of follow through and demonstrate the openness and transparency of the program itself at times.
Yeah, for sure. And you make a good point about, you know, we're calling it digital transformation, but, you know, not everyone really goes with that. And is that the right term? And I know Joe Wolf of Breast Cancer Care mentioned the digital maturity kind of measurements, where rather than thinking about that overnight transformation from one kind of an organization into an entirely different one, it's about actually looking at what level you're at in terms of maturity across lots of different areas in the organization, trying to quantify some of that, and, you know, making the changes in the areas which isn't necessarily transformation, but it is, you know, just good business change. So clearly the terminology has a big impact as to how motivated people are to take part.
Yeah, I think so. And it's very much, for me, it's about customizing it for your organization. So, you know, sometimes it is going to be the big program that really excites people and energizes them around the opportunities, and sometimes it's just that sort of slower, iterative, gradual change. And we had something actually when I was at Oxfam, that innovation for us wasn't the big change, it was just doing things better. And that can be quite innovative in the sector, just trying to improve. So it kind of, yeah, for me, it doesn't really matter. It's just making it work for your organization, listening and hearing the kind of feedback and comments from everybody around it. Do they understand it? Do they know what it means? Do they buy into it? And getting all of that support. And very much just about kind of doing things better, really, because it's more coming back to the kind of culture and people. It's more the mindset, the way that you work, and just being continuously curious, adaptive, testing things, rolling them out, getting, you know, just changing the way that the organization works into that more of an agile with a small a sense, so that you can kind of adapt, because digital transformation program or whatever else, it's not going to end. This isn't sort of a project in its own right. It's just the organisation needing to adapt, and that's going to be a continual state going forwards, which is partly a little bit scary, because you're like, are we really going to be doing this forever? But actually we are, because it's just responding to the kind of external environment that we're operating in. Huge opportunities for charities to do that, but also pressure around, as all the fundraising regulation, and people expect a different level of service, a different level of transparency and accountability. Then again, digital offers you the opportunity to do that, but it's about being really open and sort of some of the characteristics of digital in its own right that you're trying to kind of instill in the organisation.
Yeah. I've got a couple of questions for you from Twitter. So Polly is asking, what was the very first thing you did when starting your digital transformation program 2 years ago?
Oh, blimey.
Cast your mind back.
I think working out what that meant for us. So, very much going into the MS Society, we were really driven. So they brought me in to actually lead this big transformation program. So it was really nice to come into an organization where, kind of CEO-led buy-in to this. We really want to do it. We see that we partly have to, but actually really want to, that there's opportunities across the board. But the technology was massively stopping them because, as I said, it really not great sort of front-end user experience on the website. It wasn't responsive, nothing mobile, and just very basic in terms of that capability. So it was kind of doing a bit of an audit and map across the board and saying, from that maturity, so there are really standard digital maturity models out there that you can use to kind of map where your organization is. And you go through those different scales, and you have different team structures and all sorts of things through that. And it was very much about mapping where we were, so I could see where the opportunities and challenges were going to be. Partly to look at the kind of bigger picture and see where we're going and setting the vision so that everybody is excited by that and comes along with you, but also having some quick wins that you can focus on, because I think it's really important, along with this kind of iterative approach, just to show really quickly we can do something, we can work in a different way, get something out there, test it, see the results, build on it, and then build the organization's trust alongside that. Because historically, website projects and IT projects generally sort of go off, disappear for a couple of years, come back with something that doesn't really work, that nobody wants, and is irrelevant. So it's really kind of changing the attitude towards things like that and saying that's not how we work, that's not how we're going to do this. And so kind of demonstrating it from day one, really, so that you are making that impact.
Yeah, I think...
mapping more than anything, I think.
Yeah, I think that kind of audit process you talk about is really important. We've done that for a couple of organizations, and it's interesting when you get talking to people just how many issues that you uncover. But when I say issues, I mean more opportunities, and suddenly you see that how many different sort of streams of work that could take place actually exist once you start digging even just a little bit. So that kind of audit process to find out where you are as well as where you want to go is obviously really important. Another question then is, how are you measuring the success of your digital transformation program? I mean, do you have specific KPIs that you're able to quantify, or is it just too difficult to quantify some of those things? What is success for you?
I mean, for us, we're sort of midway through the process, and actually some of it's gone really well, some of it hasn't, to be completely honest. So we're kind of we have reevaluated, and we're doing some kind of short-term stuff to fill some of the gaps and some of our technical challenges, and then doing the bigger cultural piece from next year, largely. But I think it's really, really important to measure and track it and have KPIs up front, because that's the way that you can demonstrate the impact of what you're doing, how important this is, bring it home to the kind of finance or HR or whoever across the organization that needs to really buy into it. So it's going to depend on what you're looking at, and some of it's kind of anecdotal feedback at times in terms of operation, internal processes. We were looking at how long it takes to process a gift aid claim or something coming through. If that's manual at the moment, how are you going to speed it up through some of these new processes you're putting in place? Things like staff retention almost as well, and job satisfaction. If they feel they're improving their skills, capabilities, and more inspired in their job, then how can you measure and track that and then show that that's having an impact? Service delivery, obviously the number of people that you're reaching with what you're offering. So MS Society provides a huge amount of information. That's one of its kind of core roles, is to support people with MS and make them feel sort of confident in their treatments and diagnosis, for example. So, okay, how can we measure that? Is it the number of people downloading stuff? Is it their engagement with it? Is it their response, the number of calls to the helpline? We were originally thinking we might reduce that, just because if we make the website easier to use, then we may reduce the number of calls to the helpline. Actually, it could go up because it's fewer of the kind of signposting things saying I can't find this, where is it? But it's more of the emotional support. So you're actually getting quality of calls. So for me, again, it kind of really varies, but it's really, really important to establish the KPIs and how you're going to measure success up front, get that agreed by everybody as well, so that you all know that you're aiming for the same thing, or what it is you're aiming for. Obviously that can change, and almost should do throughout the lifespan, and then reporting on it, making sure you've got the tracking and stuff in place to really show the impact, because again, it can be a big program of work, it can go on for years, it can just sort of disappear, and people often don't understand it or don't engage, and it's yours and they don't really care. So how can you again show kind of how important this is ultimately to your end goal? So it's not even internal processes or fundraising income or anything else. It's improving the lives of people with MS. So how are you going to demonstrate that?
Yeah,
really.
And that's what it's all about at the end of the day. Okay, we've got time for just one more question then from Sharon, which is, Sarah, what hasn't gone well, if you're able to share? I think you touched on a couple of things that hadn't gone so well. What can you share with us?
Gosh. I think it's really interesting because when I did a program at Oxfam, we started with, we did it the other way around. We started with the technology, built an amazing website, digital platforms, massively kind of transformed that way, and didn't bring the organisation enough or along with us enough. So we didn't have the capabilities to kind of use that almost. It was more sophisticated than the teams kind of operating it. So I came into MS trying to attempt it the other way around, look at the skills we need, and then we map the technology. We kind of work out what we need to deliver that. That didn't work. We just wanted a website.
Right.
And they just needed a website, to be honest. So it's really interesting in terms of whatever you learn and whatever you think you know, it's really, you've almost got to kind of iterate yourself throughout it and see what works. The naming of it has been a big challenge because I think I said at the start, digital is a team as far as the organisation is concerned, and digital transformation is just a new website. And it's like, how can we explain that it's bigger? And if it is bigger and they get that, why are you leading it? And why are you trying to influence things in HR and finance that are nothing to do with you? So it's then about identifying the kind of stakeholders, who can you influence and how can you get them to do it, so that you're not necessarily leading that change or even seeing there's anything to do with it, but they're doing it for themselves.
Yeah.
So that's definitely been a challenge. I think trying to do agile in a non-digitally mature organisation, I put it like that, is really difficult. And we tried to kind of do agile and lean and follow sort of design thinking methodology and stuff, and really some fairly sophisticated ways of working. And we just didn't get it as an organisation. That was a huge challenge. Again, it's then how you adapt, how you put the kind of waterfall bits at the end and at the beginning and at the end, and let the kind of development team do the scrums and agile and stuff in the middle. And again, that was something we probably pushed too hard and people just didn't understand it. So it's really about the kind of flexibility, I think. And there's been a lot that we've learned throughout it, the best way of putting it. But yeah, it comes back to kind of really demonstrating why you're doing this, and the opportunities of it, so that when you face the challenges, you're going to get it. You're trying to instill massive change, and people hate change.
Yeah.
Even if they understand that it's a good thing and something they need, they still have to change stuff on a daily basis. And the digital teams, probably controversially, they'll kill me, aren't always helpful themselves. Not at the MS Society specifically, but generally, I think, because we kind of go, oh, well, that won't work. We've tried that with fundraising, they don't get it. We know that doesn't work. They're never going to get this, and it's like, well, we've got to change our own mindsets as well. So, Yeah, it's definitely been a learning experience, but I think it's one that the organisation has to go through, and a lot of it is demonstrating the failure, and when things don't work, just putting your hands up and going, okay, we tried that, let's try something else,
Yeah, yeah.
and changing the culture to accept that. I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing as long as you're not doing the same thing again, and you are learning from it. Then failure sort of isn't
Yeah,
itself a problem.
a really big cultural kind of learning there. Okay, one final question for me then is just what are your biggest digital transformation tips for charities of any size? So really, you don't have to be a huge charity to start transforming things. What would you say your top 3 tips are?
God, I would say aim big and have that kind of vision about where you want to go, and ask that big question about what would you look like if you started today, and sort of really have the ambition to get people excited, but think small to start with and start in little steps, because if you just aim straight for that, it's too big, it's too much, and you'll never get there. So really picking off the kind of quick wins or low hanging fruit or whatever you say, and just kind of tackling those. I think bringing the whole organisation with you, and getting them to understand it. We've done things like lunchtime learn, what we call them digital discos, to make it a bit more exciting. But lunchtime learning sessions, demonstrating impact of this, the excitement around it, and looking outside the sector, because no disrespect to charities, but they're not all, not everybody's kind of, we're not, we're all as bad as each other at some level. So it's like, how can you look at people outside the sector that are inspiring and demonstrating how they can do this, and where are the challenges in your field as well? So for MS, there's a lot of smaller organizations, charities, startups, apps that are being built that are tackling the problems that we're trying to address much more quickly, much more directly, and how can we sort of learn from them? And just, I don't know, third one, get on and do it.
Get on
Just
to
sort of
it.
start things. And yeah, because if you sit and talk about it, that was one of my biggest frustrations with the whole thing about calling the program digital transformation or not. We spent 3 months debating that. And I was like, let's just do something, get on with it. And what we call it, is kind of secondary as far as I'm concerned. So just starting to do something, because it is really critical. Our audiences are out there engaging in a different way, and we sort of walk through the front doors in the morning and forget how we behave and don't apply it to our own job. So it's like actually living this, and just getting on and doing it.
Yeah, yeah, and not being afraid to to get on and do it and still make a few mistakes and that not really be a huge problem. So yeah, I think that kind of get stuck in attitude has to be sort of essential if you're going to make a go of it. So thank you so much for your time and your insights today, Sarah. That's been super helpful, and I'm sure everyone who's been listening has gained a huge amount from it. We'll be around for a little bit on Twitter. If anyone's got any other questions, I'll link up anyone who didn't get time for their question with Sarah on Twitter as well. So yeah, then yeah, is there anywhere they can find out more about your digital transformation program, or is it all about following you on Twitter?
So we did have, we tried to kind of do it all externally and have a blog around this at the MS Society. That's getting caught up in the day job, that's kind of dropped off. But by all means, give me a shout on Twitter or email. Matt, you can pass on the details, and I'm happy to kind of answer any questions and give more direct. All of this stuff, I'm really 100% firm believer in making it all visible and sharing it all. So good and the bad, good, bad and the ugly. I'm happy
Excellent.
to talk about it.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Okay. So this is the last thing to say then. We do digital transformation work at Platypus Digital. As I mentioned, we audit the whole digital presence of your charity, drawing on our experience from working with over 100 UK charities. And we work with you just to provide clear, practical ways to improve your digital output. So if that's the kind of thing that you're interested in, please just drop me a line by email there, matt@platypusdigital.com, or you can tweet at platypusdigi. Thanks so much for joining us today. Thanks again to Sarah, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks a lot.